What's up, guys? I'm here today with Jason Rosati, the BJJ fitness man. He is going to run me through his streamlined 6-step, like, stay in shape while you do jiu-jitsu.
Yes, we're going to be looking at strength training from a more conceptual place. So I think a lot of the times in fitness, a lot of trainers, coaches, they like to get obsessed with the exercise itself, which is a good thing. You know, if you have a coach or a trainer, you want to have the exercises that are fit for you. But what I want to do today in this video is explain it more from a conceptual basis. So that way people can understand what type of exercises that they should be focused on. And of course, we have different levels of people that are going to be involved in strength and conditioning and jiu-jitsu, you know, and I want to make this definitely very clear that the way that this system is brought out is for jiu-jitsu athletes. So in like bodybuilding or powerlifting, the approach can be similar, but there's going to be a lot of differences because they don't need to focus on recovery from their training. And a lot of the times, our strength training when it comes to a jiu-jitsu athlete is going to be for improving jiu-jitsu training. And I think a lot of the times people have the wrong mindset, the wrong approach when they try to incorporate some sort of weightlifting into their routine, because they wind up just thinking that they need to follow that bodybuilding, powerlifting style, and then they wind up overdoing it. They get either fatigued or injured, and then that discourages them from doing it. So I put together something that's a little bit easier. In fact, I have an image that you can pop out. It's a 6-step approach to your workout. So you can follow and put in exercises for each of the 6 things, which would be your warm-up, your power compound lifts, your strength compound lifts, your isolation strength lifts, your metabolic conditioning, and your cool down. Now there can be differences depending on the athlete, but for like an 80% general concept, that's what it would look like. So I want to provide some examples of what that would look like for maybe someone that's a beginner or maybe someone that's more advanced. So if we kind of go down the shopping list of the 6 steps, you have your warm-up. Your warm-up is going to consist of dynamic stretches, which is going to help you loosen up tight muscles as well as start to activate the muscles that need to be worked in a compound lift. So for an example, we can definitely see part of a warm-up having something like a runner stretch where I can step my foot forward, step my foot back, sink into my hip here, and bring this hand up to open up my chest.
Like a yoga thing.
It's like kind of like a yoga thing, but instead of doing a static stretch where I'm sitting here for, let's say, 30 seconds, I'm bringing my hand down, switching feet, and then going to the other side. Because we want to try to prime the body for movement rather than try to focus on flexibility. So that would be a prime example of a good dynamic warm-up to do before a workout.
Let me ask you this. Do you think like traditional jiu-jitsu warm-ups are good enough for training, like consistently? Like, are there some things you would throw in there, some things you might remove?
Yeah, so the specifics as far as what exercise you're going to choose is going to depend on what injuries the athlete is going through. Now we can go through a general warm-up, and I think that there's a lot of the things that happen in a jiu-jitsu class warm-up that can be used generally.
Yeah.
But if someone has specific issues, like let's say someone has problems with their shoulder, a good warm-up for them that's more dynamic would be to, let's say, we incorporate a little bit of a hinge motion here where I bend my knees and push my hips back. I keep my arms straight, pinch my shoulders back. Remember, we're going to try to, yeah, exactly. So we want to have good posture with this. So hips are back, and I can go something like I, Y, T. And I'm activating those lower trap, shoulder blade, rear delt muscles to help start pulling everything back. Because a lot of the times, someone's shoulder issue is coming from an overdevelopment in the front. So that's something that you kind of want to think about, is you want to use the warm-up as a way to loosen up your tight muscles, depending on whatever that is for you, and you want to strengthen the muscles that are weak. If you have, let's say, bad knee pain, a good concept to work on is maybe incorporating some sort of foam rolling for your thigh, and then doing something like a hamstring curl. If we had, let's say, like a BOSU ball to do like a hamstring curl exercise to get the hamstring primed, that would then help the athlete perform better when they do their lifts. Now, that's mostly what you want to accomplish in the warm-up. The workout should then be focused on improving the strength of the athlete's tendons, ligaments, their joints, so that way they can stay safe throughout the entirety of their jiu-jitsu career. which that means exercise form is going to be very important, which we're not really going to have too much time to go over. Forms, like specific form for everything.
Yeah.
That would be
like an example.
That would be a 2-hour video for sure.
Yeah, a 2-hour video that they can probably reach out to you for.
Exactly. If you did want to do that, we can definitely look at that. But that's kind of like what a good warm-up would look like. If we keep it going, we now have a power compound lift, right? Mm-hmm. So just to kind of explain the difference between a compound movement and an isolation movement, a compound movement is an exercise that utilizes multiple joint movements. So a squat would be a compound movement, while a bicep curl would be in isolation. So it probably makes sense that, especially in the sport of jiu-jitsu, when everything's very dynamic, you're moving your whole body, most of your workouts should consist of compound movement. They're also easier to progress at. A beginner can pretty much progress in anything. A beginner, all they need to do is consistently show up. So if you're doing nothing, all you need to do is add in a couple of exercises, and that's it. You can keep it very simple. So a power compound lift, if we look at a power exercise in general, could be something like, let's say, like a broad jump. So if I were to hinge at my hips, bend my knees, bring my hands back, I can launch my weight forward as I extend at my hips and bring my hands up. A little sweaty, but as long as you have a stable surface, an exercise like that could be pretty good for a beginner. If you were to have, let's say, like a medicine ball, bringing that up overhead and slamming it down, that could be a good movement for a beginner because it's not very complicated. Yeah. Now, someone that's more advanced could, let's say, take something like a barbell and perform something like a hang clean. If they have, obviously these weightlifting techniques are quite technical, but they provide a lot of benefit. So if somebody takes the time to learn it, doing something like a hang clean, where they can pop up like that, it's going to be using everything, every muscle in their body when they do it. And the point of the power lift is to use speed, not so much as far as strength. Right? We want to be able to go from point A to point B really fast.
Yeah, and so that makes sense, like in the scope of like grappling, where you want to make these really large dynamic movements to get from position to position.
Right, especially in the case of a scramble. Yeah. Right? So if you play it a little more chill, you don't always need power, but power can be helpful when you are in a scramble. So if we were to, let's say, do something like a push press type of motion, the point of that would be to go from point A to point B as fast as possible. By using hip drive and pushing through, we're incorporating a lot of power. If you progress it that slowly, you're going to improve your power. Now, there's obviously tons of exercises. Those lifts are very complicated, but a simple jump or a simple slam could do as a power exercise. Now, if we go more for, okay, so now we're going through power, right? And the reason why we do power is because phosphagen is the energy system that we're trying to use, versus when we're doing our strength lifts, our isolation lifts, we're going to see more of a glycogen storage being used. That's water and carbohydrates in the muscle, versus like our phosphagen system is part of more of the central nervous system. We want to work that part first, because if you work your power, it's not going to impact your strength, but if you do your strength first, it's going to impact your power a lot. Yeah. So of course everyone's going to have different preferences, and of course if you're like a bodybuilder, you're going to start off with more strength lifts. But for an athlete, they're going to want to do power first. Then as we get into compound strength lifts, that's when you can incorporate an exercise or two of, let's say, if somebody is, a beginner could do this, but let's say someone is more advanced, they have barbells, they could do something like a sumo deadlift. Now they're trying to focus on lifting with strength. They're not so concerned with lifting the bar up really fast. And, even just a sumo deadlift could be a power exercise if the intention is to be really fast. But let's say the intention is to try to lift heavier in order to build strength, and we're loading up weight, then the sumo deadlift could be a good example. Yeah. If we were to take something like, maybe you're more of a beginner, you're suffering with some knee pain, something like a split squat could be a good strength exercise for a beginner, because I can slowly focus on form, I can focus on driving this knee out, keeping my foot flat, firing up that glute. That's actually going to create more stability in the knee, having it be healthier in the long run. So something like a split squat, maybe then adding in some sort of like dumbbell or weight could be used to progress that. So that would be an example of a compound strength lift. And what you could do is usually pick like 3 to 4 warm-up exercises. You pick one power movement to really focus on for the workout. You pick 2 compound strength lifts to maybe progress at, or even 1. Like I said, if you're literally doing nothing, all you need to do is a couple more exercises than last week. And you can just add that. And even if you only add in 15 minutes, that makes a big impact.
Yeah.
And then from there, you can then start to work your more isolation stuff. Now, the isolation stuff is kind of more optional. It's kind of more of like the fun muscles, right? Like if we're, you know, we use this, you know, our bicep curl, right? Maybe you just want to get more guns. Mm-hmm. You want to, you know, get some
sun's out guns.
Get the sun's out guns out. You want to do some lateral raises.
Yeah.
You could also do things like face pulls. Those are very productive. You could do things like single leg glute bridges. That could be a good isolation exercise that we're looking at. Then, I think one of my favorite parts is the metabolic conditioning. So in the metabolic conditioning, what we're doing there is trying to work core as well as a high intensity interval training involvement.
Kind of like CrossFit?
Kinda, yeah. CrossFit actually uses metabolic conditioning. The problem that I see in CrossFit is that they will circuit power exercises very commonly with other HIIT workouts, which isn't necessarily a bad thing in some cases, but the progression is going to be a lot better if you focus on your power, and then during the metabolic conditioning you focus more on like a HIIT style. Like I wouldn't really try to tell an athlete to do a power clean when they're also supersetting it with jump rope and planks, because it's a complicated exercise. We don't want to see injury. We'd rather do that in the beginning, and then if you wanted to do something a little bit lower impact, like a ball slam or a lower impact jump, then we can do that to the metabolic conditioning. So the metabolic conditioning is a little bit different from HIIT because it's a little bit more intentional. Mm-hmm. So in metabolic conditioning, we can actually incorporate some exercises that are more corrective, as well as things that will improve your anaerobic capacity as well as your core. So as an example, you could pick 3 exercises, do them for 45 seconds each, have a 15-second rest in between, and that would be considered 1 round. Then you can rest for a minute and repeat that, and you do that for 3 rounds, right? So that could be something like you start off with jumping rope for 45 seconds, then you go into a plank position for 45 seconds, and then you would do something like a squat jump, right? So it's not as complicated as, like, let's say a weightlifting movement, but you can still incorporate a little bit more power. You know, maybe you're not as intentional with it, and you're just looking to get your heart rate up. And that would be the point of the metabolic conditioning. So now as you go through that, you've worked everything in that one workout. Now, are there times that you should just focus on one thing for a period of time? Yes, but that's really going to be for like the 10%, the people that are more advanced. If you're just starting out, this is a good foundation to follow. So now you got your warm-up, you got your compound power lift, you've got your compound strength lift, you've done your isolation, now you've done your metabolic conditioning. You've worked all your systems. You are hopefully progressing at that over time, as long as you take it the right way with the right intensity, which I usually don't recommend that you go to like 100%, 10 out of 10, but that you keep it more around like 7 to 8. So that way you can recover for your jiu-jitsu.
And then that's where your training really ramps up, when you're actually doing the sport that you're training and
exactly. Yeah, you want to keep that a little bit more intense, and the strength training and the circuit training is more of a supplement to that. Yeah. Rather than if you're somebody that doesn't do any sports and you were to just lift, you can go harder, because then you're focused more on the progression of that exercise. We also want to try to prevent injuries as much as possible as well. And then of course with the cool down, that's when we try to improve flexibility. That's when we incorporate static stretching. We could do something like some sort of like wall exercise to open up our chest. We could open up our shoulders here, and we can go into static stretching movements like pulling the foot up to stretch the quad, going into maybe like a lunging type of position to open up the hip flexor. You know, this is where like you would see more of your yoga poses, right? That's a good one. You open up your hip and you would sit there for maybe 30 seconds to 60 seconds because you want flexibility at that point. It's also a good way to just kind of break up that lactic acid that just got built up from all the workouts. So that's going to help you, of course, with being sore, which if you're not as sore, you're going to do better for your jiu-jitsu training. So that's the point. You actually don't want to train so much to the point where you're super sore. You just want to work just enough to progress, but not too much to the point where you overtrain. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you're a jiu-jitsu athlete, not a strength training athlete. Yeah. You're using that strength training to supplement the jiu-jitsu. Supplement the jiu-jitsu, exactly. So you could do that maybe like 3 times a week, and that's usually good for most people. I find that the biggest struggle for most people is actually sticking to the schedule. Yeah. That's the biggest struggle there, and actually doing it commonly, which is why I say You don't need to go 100% all the time. You can go more of like 7 to 8, and that way it doesn't discourage you. You actually, I do jujitsu and I'm feeling stronger now. I feel like my cardio's improved, right? When you have those positive notions that come from the workout, you're more inclined to do it more. Versus if you kill yourself every time you work out, and then you're like, shit, like I just did jujitsu, like how am I supposed to go work out? Remember, something's better than nothing. Even if you just do one exercise out of those pillars, that's still better than if you were to do absolutely nothing. So that's how we would kind of break it down.
So let me ask, with like conventional lifts like deadlift, squat, and like bench press, are those good ones to build like the power and the compound stuff? Or like where do those from like a conventional bro workout fit in there?
You would probably see that more in the compound strength lifts as well as the compound isolation. By incorporating some power movements before that, like jumping exercises that you measure for progress, weightlifting type of exercises that involve going from point A to point B, you would do that first. So then you would go into your strength training where I'm trying to build strength, trying to build muscle. That's when you would do your compound strength lifts.
All right, man. Well, that's awesome information, Jay. Is there anything else you want to close out here with?
Just keep showing up. Just keep doing it consistently, and don't beat yourself up too much. Remember, especially if you're just learning this, if you're just starting, just do something. Because something's better than nothing. You know, I think that's the biggest thing I could say.
Cool. All right. Shout out to Jerry for helping us film here.
Thank you, Jerry.
Shout out to the BBC for letting us film in the location.
Oops.
And take it easy, guys.
Peace out.
Dopamine is what is like that rewarding, relaxed feeling after accomplishing a task. So think like if you have like a hard jiu-jitsu session or a hard workout, or like you eat something really healthy and you're not used to eating healthy, you get this like hit of like, oh, I feel good about myself. But the problem is that our brain doesn't know the difference between those things and things like eating junk food, sugar, drugs, sex, watching TV, social media. Those things those things trigger the same hormone in the brain, so it becomes very easy to get addicted to. Now, back in the day, our dopamine